Let's review for this factoring test together. The first part of the test is like numbers 1 through 8, where you are just factoring one expression. So for example, number 1, that has 3 terms. If we remember our rules, the first thing we want to check and see is, can we take out a GCF? If it has 2 terms, we want to check difference of squares. If it has 3 terms, we want to check that quadratic multiplier. So number 1, you can't take out a greatest common factor. It has 3 terms. It is the easier type because there is a 1 in front of the x squared, so you do not need to draw that additional line. So factors of the third term, which is 20, that add up to -9, and that's 5 and 4, and they both need to be negative. You could check that. -5 times -4 is 20. -5 plus -4 is -9. And so that is your answer, x minus 5 times x minus 4. Moving on to number 2. Again, this is a quadratic multiplier. It is the easier type because there's a 1 in front of that first term. So factors of -42 that add up to -1. That would be 7 and 6. The negative goes with the bigger number because the bigger number needs to match this bottom number. So my answer is, and let's check that before we go on, -6 or -7 times 6 equals -42, and -7 plus 6 equals -1. So you get m minus 7 times m plus 6. All right, moving on, number 3, that is 2 terms. You cannot take out a GCF. We want to see, is this a difference of 2 squares? Do I have a minus symbol? And I do. And do I have 2 perfect squares? Those are both perfect squares. You're going to take the square root of 4b squared, and that's 2b. That goes in the first spot in each set of parentheses. Put a plus and a minus. Doesn't matter the order. You could have done minus plus. And then take the square root of 25, and you get 5. And that's what goes in the second spot in the parentheses, and that is your final answer. Number 4. 2r squared minus 98. Can you take out a greatest common factor? And you can. You can take out a 2. So I'm going to divide each of these terms by 2. I get r squared minus your 98 divided by 2 is your 49. And then we're going to look at what's inside the parentheses here and ask yourself, can I factor this again? It's 2 terms. Is it possibly difference of 2 squares? And it is. There's a minus with 2 perfect squares. So I get r plus 7 times r minus 7. I took the square root of the first term and the second term, the square root of that 49. And then don't forget to bring down that 2. Number 5. Again, ask yourself, can I take out a greatest common factor? I can't. This has 3 terms, so it's a quadratic multiplier. Now it has a number in front of the x squared, which means that we have to add that additional line there. You're going to ignore that squared and copy down the first term, 2x on the left, 2x on the right. A times c goes in that top spot, so a times c, 2 times 3 is 6, and b, that 5, goes in the bottom spot. Factors of 6 that add up to 5. Let's see if 2 times 3 works. 2 times 3 is 6, 2 plus 3 is 5, that works. So the left circle and the right circle, that's your final answer, but before you write down your final answer, you need to make sure, look at the 2 numbers, and make sure that they can't be reduced. So 2x plus 3, that one is good, but the 2 and the 2, those both are divisible by 2, so we can reduce them. So 2x divided by 2 is x, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and then on the right side we have 2x plus 3, and that is your final answer. All right, number 6, let's do the same thing again. It's a quadratic multiplier. It's the harder kind because there's a number in front of your first term, so draw that extra line. Ignore the exponent and write 3x in the top left and the top right. A times c, so 3 times your -5 is what goes in the top. And that middle term is your b value. That is what goes in the bottom. Factors of negative 15 that add up to negative 14 would be negative 15 times 1 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 1 is 14. So again, this is almost to our final answer. We just need to make sure that we can't reduce. On the left side, you can divide both the 3 and the 15 by 3. You could also type it in like this, 3 divided by 15, math, enter, enter, and that tells you 1x and then minus 5x. Because of that negative, I didn't type in that negative, but that's okay. So 3x divided by 3 is x, negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. And then you have your 3x plus 1, and that is your final answer. All right, moving on to number 7. So again, ask yourself, can I take out a greatest common factor? And this time we can. All 3 terms can be divided by 2, so that is your greatest common factor. So 2c squared divided by 2 is c squared, 14 divided by 2 is 7c, and 24 divided by 2 is your 12. All right, now ask yourself, can I factor again? If you look at just what's inside the parentheses, there are 3 terms. And there's not a number in front of the c squared if you're only looking at what's inside the parentheses, so it's the easier kind, factors of 12 that add up to 7, and that would be 4 and 3, because 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is 7. So 2 on the outside, c plus 4 times c plus 3, and that is your final answer. All right, moving on to number 8. Again, ask yourself, can I take out a greatest common factor? And this time, all 3 terms share an x. So I can divide x out of all of them. So that is my GCF. So 3 minus 1, that would be x squared. One of those x's cancels with one of those, so I get minus 9x, and my x's cancel, and you end with plus 18. 3 terms. Quadratic multiplier, easier kind because there's not a number in front of x squared, factors of 18 that add up to negative 9, and that would be negative 6 and negative 3. Negative 6 times negative 3 is positive 18. Negative 6 plus negative 3 is negative 9. So I get x minus 6 times x minus 3, and that is your final answer. All right, next part of the test is like 9, 10, and 11, where you are just reducing fractions. You need to check and see if you can factor first. Let's start with number 9. 9 over 6, you could plug that into your calculator. 9 divided by 6, math, enter, enter. That reduces to 3 halves. Or you could do that in your head. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. I have an x to the 5th and an x cubed here. So 3 of those cancel with 3 of those 5 x's, so that leaves 2 on top. And y is by itself. There's nothing to cancel it with. So you get 3x squared over 2y on the bottom. Okay, number 10. Y squared minus 49. Y squared minus 49 stands out to me as a difference of 2 squares. You have a perfect square, and a minus symbol, so that would be y plus. Take that square root of 49 and you get 7. So y plus 7, y minus 7. And then on the bottom here, you just rewrite that y plus 7. Remember that plus glues that y and that 7 together, so the only thing that y plus 7 would cancel with would be another y plus 7, and that leaves y minus 7 as your final answer. All right, let's do one more of the division. Look at your x squared plus 7x plus 12. Can you factor that? It is 3 terms. Factors of 12 that add up to 7 would be 3 and 4. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 plus 4 is 7. So I get x plus 3 times x plus 4. Then go ahead and look at the bottom there. So factors of your 32 that add up to your 12 would be 8 and 3. So let's, 8 and not 3, 8 and 4. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 plus 4 is 12. So you get x plus 8 and x plus 4. All right. Next step is to see if we can cancel anything. We can cancel those x plus 4s. So your final answer is x plus 3 over x plus 8. All right, the next part of your test is multiplication. So that would be like 12, 13, and 14. And then we'll finish with 2 division problems. So number 12, you don't have to factor. You can simply just cancel. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a shortcut here. You could go 7 times 48 divided by 6 in your calculator. And you get 56. So all of those become 56 on the top. And then you can look at your x's. You have x squared and x cubed on the bottom. So you can cancel 2 of those with 2 of those, which leaves 3 minus 2 is 1x on the bottom. And then you have 2 y's on the bottom and 6 y's on the top. So cancel 2 of those with 2 of those, and that leaves y to the 4th on the top. All right, moving on to number 13, multiplication. Top left, you can factor that y squared minus 9. Difference of 2 squares, that becomes y plus 3 times y minus 3. Remember, you took the square root of 9 to get that 3. Okay, bottom left here, we have your 8y minus your 24. So can you take out a greatest common factor? It looks like you can take out your 8. So divide each of those by 8, and you get y minus, and it should be, I typed that in backwards, y minus 24 divided by 8 gives you your 3. So then you have times on the right side. Those are factored, y plus 7 times y plus 3. So you can go ahead and cancel our like terms. It looks like I have y plus 3's and I have y minus 3's. So your final answer would be y plus 7 on the top over your 8. All right, moving on to number 14. Top left, y squared minus 5x minus 6, factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 5. That would be negative 6 times positive 1. Negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. So I get x minus 6 times x plus 1. If you go on here to the bottom left, x squared plus 9x plus 18, factors of 18 that add up to 9. Your factors of 18 that add up to 9 would be your 3 and your 6. 3 times 6 is 18, 3 plus 6 is 9. So that becomes x plus 3 times x plus 6. All right, top right is difference of 2 squares. So x squared minus 36, if you take the square root of both of those, that square root of that 36 is 6. So you get x minus 6 times x plus 6. And then bottom right here, x squared plus your 7x plus 6. Factors of your 6 that add up to 7 are 1 times 6. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 plus 6 is 7. So I get x plus 1 times x plus 6. So then I want to go ahead and I want to cancel. I have x plus 6's here that can cancel. I have x plus 1's that can cancel. What's left on top is I have 2x minus 6's, so I'm going to write that as x minus 6 squared. And then on the bottom here I have x plus 3 times x plus 6, and so that is your final answer. All right, moving on to these division problems. We're going to go ahead and start with the left, top left side. Z squared minus 4, that can factor. It is difference of 2 squares, so we're going to write it as z plus 2 times z minus 2. And let me go back and write that 2 cursive, so it looks like a 2. Z plus 2 times z minus 2. On the bottom left, I have a z. Remember, with division, you change it to multiplication and you flip the second fraction. So that 5z cubed goes on top and that z minus 2 goes on the bottom. Next step, I want to cancel. I can cancel my z minus 2's. One of these z's can cancel. There's 3 z's up here on the top. One of those z's can cancel with one of those, so that's z squared on the top. So what's left, we have our z plus 2 that is glued together. So you have your z plus 2, and then you have your z squared on the top, and you have your 5 on the top. So you end up with 5z squared times z plus 2. All right, last problem here. Again, we'll start with the top left. X squared minus 25, that is difference of two squares, so I get x plus 5 times x minus 5. Bottom left, factors of 100 that add up to negative 20, that would be negative 10 and negative 10. So I get x minus 10 times x minus 10. Change that division to multiplication and flip. So that bottom right there, x squared minus 16x plus 60, your factors of 60 that add up to negative 16, that would be negative 10 times negative 6. So that now goes on the top because we flipped those. So you have x minus 10 times x minus 6. And then top right, 7x minus 35. Take out a greatest common factor, take out a 7. So that means I'm dividing both of those by 7, and I get x minus 5. Last step, which is my favorite, to cancel whatever we can cancel. We've got x minus 5s, we have x minus 10s. I'm carefully looking. There's still quite a bit left, but I don't see anything else that I can cancel. So what's left on the top is that x plus 5 times x minus 6. And what's left on the bottom is that x minus 10, and that's 7. So 7 times x minus 10, and that is it. Okay, let us know if you have any questions.